Hello, and welcome to the four mental faculties that combine into one to change your life. My name is Lawrence Gold, and if you and I have not gotten acquainted in some other venue, let me give a bit of background to myself. I'm a longtime practitioner in the field of somatics, which is the study of embodied existence. Couple of $10 words, so I'll simplify that a bit. Embodied means born and having relations in the world. And so the term embodied existence applies to the full spectrum of experiences to which living beings are both vulnerable and available. What does that mean? Well, it means something in the context of the 10,000 shocks of life that flesh is heir to, all the bumps and the bruises of life, which in my clinical practice I deal with in terms of chronic physical pain and movement restrictions. And in the new development of my work has to do with intelligent self-empowerment. I've been at this for 25 years, and I took formal training with the developer of the clinical methods and developed the other methods having to do with self-empowerment and the ability to change one's own life through recognition of certain principles of clinical somatic education combined with the content of my own life, which seems to have been generously laden with difficulties. So I developed these procedures at first to clear up my own difficulties. And then as I began to share them with other people, we found that we got consistent good results with people getting through difficulties or quandaries in life and enable them to turn the corner of certain life transitions with grace and aplomb, able to undertake challenges and be more than equal to them by clearing out the accumulated conditioning that they inherited from their earlier stages of life. So that gives you something of an idea of the field in which this particular webinar offering is occurring. It's primarily for people who have taken or want to take, are ready to take initiative in refining their own lives and streamlining their own lives of the difficulties that create complications. You will have seen my email message to you talking about the quandaries of life to which we are subject. And largely they're quandaries because we have conflicting learning or no learning with which to handle those difficulties that surface in life. Difficulties, say, of relationships, of work, of self-worth and emotional state, ingenuity and creativity. You can see how that fits into our feeling equal to the challenges of life. And so this offering is for people who are ready to or are already taking initiative in clearing out the difficulties of their own lives and streamlining their lives. In our offering today, we'll have several sections, so let me delineate those now. We're going to talk more about the nature of the quandaries of existence that people face as a matter of common experience. We'll be talking about some of the specifics, and for those of you who want to come into the live camera and microphone section, I've given you the Google Hangouts link by which you may come in merely by clicking. That's in the email message you received in response to your request for access to this webinar. And you'll be able to ask questions and share comments and views. So we'll be going through that side of things, the kind of quandaries in life that people experience, and then talk about the underpinnings, which are those four mental faculties to which I refer. I'll give you a bit of overview of that and then begin to acquaint you more directly with how those faculties operate in our own lives with some procedures, guided meditations, if you will. And then once we've gone through the first guided meditation, we'll go to the next stage of guided meditation on those four mental faculties. And these guided meditations are psychoactive. What psychoactive means is that they produce changes in how you feel and how you perceive yourself and life. Once we've gone through those procedures, we'll have more time for conversation, questions, answers, comments, and then I'll make a number of things available to you. One of them is an article on the likeness of procedures developed on the basis of those four mental faculties to much more well-known transformative processes that use those faculties in a partial or indirect way, and show how those procedures and the procedures involving these four mental faculties have common ground and are actually working on the same principles. And finally, I'll tell you how you can get more of the kind of teaching that I'm providing to you in this webinar. There are different offerings. The first generally is called the Gold Key Release, and I'll talk about that more as we reach toward the end of our time together. We expect this to take something around 90 minutes or fewer, depending on how quickly we progress through the material and how much conversation we have. So in terms of the general quandaries of life, this is just the common stuff of everybody's life, what I would call the insults and injuries of existence that leave their mark in us. And I made reference to that in the email message where I talked about who hasn't been bested by circumstances and felt the worse for wear. And then I named some examples in terms of relationships, turns of life, turns of circumstances, losses, disappointments, and things that we believe consciously or subconsciously that hold us back, that either prevent us from getting started on a new course in life or improving our course, our circumstances in life, or that actively interfere even when we're making our best efforts. Now, what all of those things have in common are the effects that come from those four mental faculties. Those four mental faculties are functions that every one of us experiences moment to moment. And those are attention, intention, memory, and imagination. And these are the underpinnings of daily existence. Let me explain a bit more about that. Our ability to be here now, as that teaching goes, depends entirely on what we consider now to be. Our sense of now is heavily memory-based. Our ability to recognize anything in our lives depends on memory. If we have no memory of anything like what we're confronted with, we just have no way of making sense of it. Likewise, it depends upon intention. Intention is our drive to have things turn out a certain way or not turn out certain ways. Memory and intention go together because you need to intend to remember something in order to remember it, and you have to remember what you're intending in order to keep intending it, particularly in the face of the distractions of life and the incidences of things going wrong that derail us from a straight path. So it takes a kind of insistent, determined memory to stay on purpose with our intentions. Now, attention figures into that because attention is what enables us to locate any kind of experience. If you're in a room, if you're going to find somebody in the room, you locate them by paying attention to the room and who's in it and what's in it. And by that means, you locate. You locate people or things or places. So attention is the great locator. And imagination. Imagination has a number of different names. We can call it emergence, the appearance of what's new. We may call it expectation. Expectation is imagining what's about to happen. Anticipation, likewise. And curiosity. So curiosity, imagination, emergence, expectation, anticipation, all of these fall into the imagination category. Now, without any one of those four, we can't have an experience of anything. If you have no memory, you can't keep your attention on something because you don't remember what you were paying attention to. If you have no control of your attention, and ADD is a popular term and diagnosis these days for people who can't manage their attention for whatever reason, they can't stay on track and carry out an intention. More than that, if they can't attend to something, there's just no way they can get the input, the sensation of that something into themselves, so they have no experience of it. If a person has no intention relative to something, it's utterly irrelevant to them. It doesn't even show up on their radar. No experience. And imagination. If the person isn't turned toward unfolding experience, they're not going to be able to track what's happening in their lives. And it's by imagining that people compare what's actually happening to what they remember. They imagine that something is happening to them of a particular kind. Likewise, expectation. No expectation, no motivation, no experience of anything. So those four faculties operate together, and simultaneously, as I put it, they combine into one, which is your sense of yourself, your sense of others, and your sense of the world. Those four faculties are the underpinnings of the entirety of our experience, of our sense of being alive. They're entirely sufficient, and they're entirely necessary for our sense of being alive, and they're also entirely necessary for our ability to bring about change in our lives. That means anything new, anything we've committed to doing, anything within our experience whatsoever. So attention, intention, memory, and imagination are the four faculties that combine into one to change our lives. And they're also what have already combined into one to give us the sense of life that we have. As you might guess, the variety of different kinds of experiences have a variety of different memories associated with them, intentions about them, qualities of what we experience by putting our attention on them, and different expectations about how they might go, how they might unfold. So we're actually talking about the underlying structure of our sense of reality. You with me so far? Okay. Now, I've just named four internal faculties, faculties of our internal or subjective life. But what about the objective side of life? The circumstances, the situations? Well, there's an exact correspondence there. As I mentioned earlier, attention is the means by which we locate things in our experience. So location is a universal trait or property of objective reality. Everything has a location. Now, the location may be internal or external, but in terms of the objective world, it's always external. Likewise, for memory, we have in the objective world duration, that is, the lasting of things in time, the continuity of experience. Everything has some measure of continuity, anywhere from a nanosecond, a billionth of a second, to eons of time. They have all duration, they all endure, and that all corresponds to memory, which is nothing more than the endurance of the imprint, the traces of an experience. So, memory and endurance or duration. Intention, our internal experience, has in the objective world what they call in physics tendency. Tendency is the consistent or lasting property of something existing and changing in a certain way. So tendency is the direction of change. And we all have a sense of tendency. When we meet up with somebody we know, we expect that they're going to behave in a certain way and have certain recognizable features. That is to say, they have a tendency to behave in a certain way or certain ways. In the inanimate world, gravity is a tendency for things to move toward masses. A mass is anything with density or weight, such as a planet. So all planets have gravity, and gravity is a tendency to move toward the planet, then in other terms, to fall if you're not already in contact with the ground. In electricity, there's a tendency for negative and positive things to complete and attract each other. The sun tends to shine. We expect the sun to keep shining. It has a tendency to shine. So that's tendency, and that corresponds to intention. It is the drive for things to go a certain way or not go a certain way. And in terms of imagination, that internal state, curiosity, expectation, anticipation, these all correspond to the unfolding of the physical universe, such as has been described by astrophysicists as the Big Bang, which led to the formation of stars and planets and astronomical bodies, which actually form the substance of our very existence. All of the atomic elements, the chemistry that constitutes our physical existence, emerged out of stars. Stars were, in a sense, the factory that created the material that becomes and became our world. So it's the unfolding, the evolution, the development of things, and their integration into larger and larger, more and more complex and complex and complex experiences. The unexpected showing up as physical experience. So imagination and the showing up of the unexpected in physical experience correlate exactly together also. So we are ourselves emergent from that inanimate universe, and we incorporate something more than that, which is the ability to move by ourselves. Whereas the inanimate universe tends to move by momentum or by tendency. Once in motion, it tends to stay in motion a certain way unless affected by external circumstances. So that's the underpinnings of our existence. However, I recognize that for many people, there's a kind of vagueness about what's meant by intention, a certain problematic quality about memory, the ability to remember things and the tendency to forget, limited imagination, and sometimes just not knowing where to put our attention. So this ADD culture in which we live tends to create problems for people in their lives. People can't carry an intention through to the end because either they don't know how, they don't know what to pay attention to, or the process of development has not yet occurred in them in a particular direction. And I understand again that these, for many people, are vague terms. So I'm going to take us all through some exercises that make those terms much more concrete to us. That makes it much more obvious in our own experience what those terms refer to. So let's get started with that. It's a very simple procedure. We're going to address those 4 faculties one by one and have you do concrete acts with each of them. For example, let's start with attention. It's a very obvious thing. Right now, you're paying attention to this webcast, to what's being said. You may also have some distraction in your home environment that's calling for your attention. This exercise involves deliberately placing your attention in different places. This is just to give you a feeling for locating things, for deliberately attending. So let's do that now. The most obvious thing is just notice the attention you're paying to what I'm saying. Notice the effort of keeping your attention on it. Notice that doing that involves consistently holding to the location through which these words are coming to you. Your headphones, earbuds, speakers in the room. You're aiming yourself toward that. You're aiming your senses toward that in order to absorb what's coming in. Okay, now let's choose another item in your environment and put your attention on that. Notice what it takes to put your attention on it. Okay, complete what you're doing. Now choose another item, and as you put your attention on it, notice it takes a moment to focus on it. Do that now. Okay, complete what you're doing. And choose another item. Notice that it took a moment to focus. And in order to focus, you have to have kept your attention there by remembering what you're putting your attention on long enough to come into focus. Good. And now complete what you're doing and choose another item. Okay. And complete what you're doing. So you've just had an experience of locating 4 different experiences. Now let's change this a little bit. Let's bring in remembering. First step, put your, just remember something right now. It doesn't matter what. Okay. Now notice you had to put your attention on what you were remembering. So the act of remembering involved more than just remembering. It also involved putting your attention on it. You had to locate the memory. Okay, choose another memory. Good. And let that go. And now remember something in your environment, something in the room. That's right. So notice that you can remember something that's presently happening. And in fact, that's exactly what's going on moment to moment. When we speak of what we call now or the now, what we're really speaking of is very short term memory combined with long term memory. Short term memory tends to fade out quickly, and that permits us to shift our attention from one thing to another without the perceptions getting muddied. One fades out, the other replaces it. That's short term memory. And in fact, what we're experiencing that we call the now is actually memory. I'll say more about this a bit later when I point out that nobody has ever had an experience of now. And that will become clear as I get into it. Okay, let's now go back to remembering. Notice that you have to let go of what I just said in order to return your attention to the exercise. That's a case of short-term memory fading out. But if you look at the monitor and you see me on the monitor, and you recognize me as a person, even though we're perhaps just now acquainted, it's memory of people in general that enables you to recognize a person. So our long-term memory, colors, flavors, are present short-term memory of the moment. In fact, if we have substantial numbers or intensity of memory, long-term memory, it may heavily color our present moment experience, which is short-term memory. So long-term memory colors and flavors short-term memory. Now that's a little bit of a clue as to why memories of previous experience may interfere with our accurate perception of what's going on now. Think of relationships. Think of how relationships in the past color your sense of relationships in the present. So, memory is the persistence of experience, persistence of the traces of experience. Okay, let's complete what you're doing with this particular part of the exercise, which has to do with, say, remembering a past relationship, and choose something else to remember. Good. Now you may notice that the act of choosing something else to remember is an intentional act. You intend to remember something else. That's a clue. And we'll get to what that's a clue of momentarily. Right now, we're on the verge then of considering intention. Intention has gotten a bad rap. You've heard the saying, the road to hell is paved with murky or unclear intentions. Intention that has become complicated of it's not the fault of intention, it's the fault of unclear intention, complicated intention, interfered with intention, not pure intention. Pure intention directly and simply gives rise to now recall another intention that you have in life. Okay, complete what you're doing. Choose an intention you once had. Okay. Now choose another intention. Recall another intention. It may not be evenly developed. You may have lots of intention, but not such a good memory. See what I mean? Okay. Now let's take a little closer look at that process of remembering an intention. In order to remember an intention, you have to imagine it. You have to apply yourself to it. You have to actually call up an imagined memory in order to remember it. You have to imagine it into existence. Let's do something. Let's start with imagining something that once occurred to you, something that happened in your life. You notice the act of imagining it caused you to remember it. Now, something that you would like to have happen. Imagine that. Okay. Now, think of a situation that's happening in your life right now, unfinished business, and notice what you expect might happen. And there may be more than one turnout for this. So imagine each of those in turn. It can go one way or it can go another. Okay. Now, something about which you're curious. Notice you had to imagine it in order to have the experience of being curious about it. And you had to pay attention to the thing about which you're curious. You had to remember the thing about which you're curious. And you had to intend to experience curiosity about it. All four of the faculties work together. If any one of them is missing, we can't have an experience. So we've just done concrete examples. We had you use your physical room and memories. Now we're going to go more abstractly. And I've already started that with you by pointing out that in order to pay attention to something, you have to remember what you're paying attention to. Failure to remember what you're paying attention to, we call attention deficit disorder. What we'll do is a series of connections of pairs. The pairs consisting of any two of attention, memory, intention, and imagination. And I'll be taking you through this in a methodical and systematic way. And this is where you find the psychoactive nature of this exercise. You're going to find clearings in your mind occurring. You're going to be coming into focus in a way that you likely don't ordinarily do. And you may also notice, I think you're likely to notice, that you're a lot more able to call upon certain faculties than you are to call upon others and have them actually happen for you. So let's start now. I'm going to ask you to notice the feeling of attending. Okay, good. Now, the feeling remembering. Good. Now, attending to remembering. Good. Now, remembering, attending. Good. So I'm going to comment right here about something, which is if you get an experience of either attending or remembering, you can't have done it wrong. The very act of attending requires you to remember to attend, to pay attention. And the very act of remembering requires you to pay attention to remembering. The different faculties are all part of the same larger, this is they combine into one part, the same larger set of faculties that we experience as our existence. You can't do one without the other. So you can't do it wrong. The most that can be said is you might be able to do it vividly or faintly, perhaps. With practice, those faculties come alive so that you become much more able to call upon any of the faculties. Your ability to pay attention improves, your ability to remember improves, your sense of directing intention improves, and your imagination improves. So let's continue now with the exercise. So, the feeling of remembering. Good. Now, the feeling of intending. The drive to have things go a certain way or not to go a certain way. Intending. Good. Now remember intending. Good. Now intend remembering. Good. Now the feeling of intending. Good. Now the feeling of imagining. Good. Now intend imagining. Good. Now imagine intending. Good. Now the feeling of imagining. Good. Now the feeling of attending, paying attention. Good. Now imagine attending. Imagine paying attention. Good. Now attend to imagining. Good. Now we're going to reinforce the ability to call up each of those faculties by a change of rhythm or arrangement. And it's going to go like this. For example, attend to remembering, remembering. Remember, attending to attending. Now, in this process, you might find that you feel like you lose the handle you have on what you're doing. If I say attend to remembering, remembering, it may make you feel like you're knocked off kilter, perhaps. Just relax into that. What will happen is we'll be bypassing your thinking mind into your feeling mind. So when I say attend to remembering, remembering, just take what comes and don't try to make it be a certain way. Just accept what comes. What will happen as we go through this is things will tend to become more vivid. The increase of vividness increases with practice. So if we do this procedure, which I call the setup, S-E-T-U-P, if you do it repeatedly, you bring those four faculties online more and more. Let's just do the experiment now, have the experience, and just take whatever comes. It goes like this. Attend to remembering. Attend to remembering, remembering. Remember, attending. Remember, attending to attending. Good. Now remember, intending. Good. Now remember, intending, intending. Good. No matter what you got, you did it correctly because you're intending to remember intending. Good. Now intend remembering. Good. Now intend remembering remembering. Good. Now intend imagining. Good. Now intend imagining imagining. Good. If you imagined anything at all, you did it correctly. Good. Now imagine attending, paying attention. Good. Now imagine attending to attending. Good. Now attend to imagining. Good. Now attend to imagining imagining. Good. Now attend to intending. Good. Now attend to intending. Good. Now intend attending. Good. Now intend attending to attending. Good. Now remember imagining. Good. Now remember imagining. Good. Now imagine remembering. Good. Now imagine remembering. Good. So if you remembered anything at all, including remembering, you did it correctly. The odd thing about this is you can't do this wrongly. You can only do it more or less vividly. So say it happened that you couldn't do any one step at all. It would mean that your vividness was just so faint that you couldn't detect it. But with additional practice, that vividness would increase, and I expect would increase fairly rapidly and substantially, because that's generally how things work with this kind of procedure. So we've done a series of connections among those four, every possible connection. And if you notice what you feel right now, you are likely to notice a heightened state of mental alertness or focus. That is, you'll feel more sharply focused, more present. What you've done is to vivify, to bring to life those four faculties to some degree, and these two exercises. What happens as you practice more with the exercises is you discover what's in the way of any one of those faculties acting vividly, and simultaneously, that is, as soon as you recognize what was in the way, it shifts. What was in the way tends to disintegrate or get out of the way, and you end up with a clearer experience of that particular step. And that clarity affects your entire life process. In other words, you have empowered your own four faculties that combine into one so that you can act more effectively with greater attention and greater access to memory. You have a greater intelligence about things. With greater intention and greater imagination, you have greater creativity. And in fact, it works like that. All of these faculties are the underpinnings of the other faculties, the virtues of our intelligence. If you name any kind of intelligence whatsoever, we can find that these four faculties are the underpinnings of that kind of experience. And by improving your access to those four faculties, you improve whatever intelligence you're working on. That means that whatever situation you may be addressing in your life, something that has you in a quandary, something about which you feel stuck, becomes unstuck. And in fact, you discover that the sense of stuckness was exactly the deficiency of one or more of those four basic faculties, whether it's the ability to remember things about it, the ability to focus, the ability to come up with new solutions, new ideas. They all trace back to these four faculties. The quandary, the pathos of human existence is that these faculties generally come online very unevenly according to what we learned from family, society, educational institutions, and the mass media, the entertainment and news media, including advertising. Let me illustrate a little bit about that. You may have noticed in more recent years a trend in editing, video editing, to chop things up into segments that are 1 second or less and to flash them one after the other, after the other, after the other. This happens frequently in advertising, but also in things like music videos and general entertainment produced these days. The quick cut edit. Well, what does that do to a person? It trains them to a short attention span. It doesn't give them sufficient time to remember what they know about such things. They're a way of shoving something under the door without permission. Hence, they use these things in advertising to bypass our discriminative intelligence. In entertainment, it keeps us shallow. It prevents us from seeing and feeling the depth of what's being communicated. It goes by too quickly. But it does trigger associations in us involuntarily because it happens faster than we can mobilize our intention. You noticed that in doing the exercise, it took a period of time to focus on each new step. Another term for that period of time to focus is reaction time. So these techniques of entertainment are deliberately designed to happen faster than our reaction time. Again, it's a way of instilling impressions into us, putting impressions into us without our permission. Now, what do you imagine that does to our sense of empowerment? How do you feel when you come away from viewing a commercial where they use rapid editing techniques? Do you feel like you are sharper and clearer, that you have the intelligence to make a decision about the item advertised, or do you feel like something has been slipped in without your permission to affect your mind from a subconscious level? This is, by the way, another meaning of the word subliminal. Subliminal basically means without our permission. And if you do things faster than a person can consciously process, so that it goes in subconsciously, in effect, there's a disempowerment situation. Need I say that we see that all over the place these days? So what I'm offering you here is a kind of subversive teaching, one in which you take command of yourself and see through the strategies of those who would manipulate or exploit us. That's why, if you look at the screen, I have the words intelligent self-empowerment on the banner under my name. I'm about people becoming empowered, teaching people the means of their empowerment by recovering their own faculties, the four mental faculties that combine into one, which is our experience of life at any moment. And by mastering those faculties, we gain the capacity to change our life and also to bypass or refuse changes that are not in our own best interest. The gold key release, and I also mentioned further teachings that use these four faculties that combine into one. So the gold key release is the entry level procedure. It's the easiest to learn because it's best framed in the kind of languaging that we're familiar with. And by languaging, I mean words like experience, like, oh, let me just run through the procedure in my own mind so I get the words from it. Yeah, in fact, I'll say it aloud so you'll get a sense of the steps of the gold key release. In the gold key release, a person chooses some situation that they're uncomfortable with in general. This is generally how it's done. The intention is to free themselves from the discomfiture and from the sense of being in the grip of that situation. That's how people choose items for the gold key release. Something they want to make dissolve, something they want to release, free themselves from. So having chosen an item, it starts like this. This is the step-by-step development of the gold key release. The first step is feel having that. That means feel the thing or situation about which you feel uncomfortable or that you would prefer to change. Feel having that. The next step is notice what it feels like to have that. Then notice where you feel that in you. Notice its general size and shape, that feeling of the thing in you. Notice its intensity, how intense it is. Notice any intention you have toward it or about it. Feel how it all matters. Notice how it mattering involves you. Think to yourself, it's true, it's true. It's untrue, it's untrue, it's untrue. Remember the feeling of it's untrue. Remember the feeling of it's true. Allow how remembering involves imagining. Stop imagining. Let it dissolve and dissipate. Awaken. Typically, we now ask, is it more, less, the same, or gone, this item you started with? If it's gone, you're done. If there's something left, we run through the gold key release again. Generally, a cycle, something like 3 cycles is sufficient to get something to dissolve completely to the point that you have trouble remembering what it was, or if you can remember it, it's like a hologram or like smoke. It has appearance but no substance. So we use the gold key release for 2 purposes. One is to learn how to practice with those 4 faculties that combine into one, to get familiar with them, because the gold key release includes all 4. And the second thing is to clean up our lives. So say we have, as one student did, a commitment to do a public talk on stage. And this person was unaccustomed to public speaking and afraid of slipping up. You've heard me slip up on occasion here, right? It's a question of whether or not we have the memory imprint in us of situations of embarrassment, say, that color our present experience and make public speaking seem like a daunting situation. This particular person ran the gold key release on her fear of public speaking. And guess what happened? It disappeared. She gave her talk on stage, slipped up, fumbled an introduction of another speaker, and instead of freezing like a deer in headlights, she laughed. And the whole audience, she told me, laughed with her. That's the kind of transformation that can occur by cleaning oneself up, by streamlining our access to those four faculties and in cleaning up what's in the way of them. It was, as she put it, it was, how did she put it, a turning point in her life. This is common with the gold key release. What happens is that as we clean up, two things happen. One is we get greater facility in whatever we're doing. And the other is that we come up with spontaneous, more fitting responses to the situations than mere memory would have given us. We've cleaned out the space so that we can operate more spontaneously. Other people have had analogous experiences to hers. Areas in their life. Oh, here's one. The daughter of a certain person that I knew in high school, experiencing social stress in high school. I taught her mother the gold key release. She taught the daughter, took her daughter through it, reported back to me a few days, problem gone. Now, these are, in a sense, mysterious claims because you have no experience of them, but these are actual situations. But as I like to say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So practicing these procedures produces the results, and there's no way to attest to the results except from direct personal experience. Anything else is hearsay, and as we know, there's plenty of hearsay out there. There are all kinds of claims out there for energy clearings and manifestation courses. And I will tell you, not that they're illegitimate, but that they're using the same four faculties as we've just gone through, but they're using it in a teaching structure which doesn't necessarily emphasize all four equally. And they don't even understand in general that they're working with four faculties. Some teachers recognize two. They'll say that recognizing a certain famous person. One certain teacher referred to Leonardo da Vinci, a genius of creativity of Italy, centuries back. And she said he had intention and attention. She didn't happen to mention memory and imagination, although if you're familiar with the work of Leonardo da Vinci, you'll know that he had plenty of imagination and he had a terrific memory. Proof of the pudding is in the eating. Generally, it takes some time for people to develop facility in the gold key release, just because they're not used to working with attention, intention, memory, and imagination, and the structure of that procedure itself. So I offer a course in which I teach people how to use these procedures, at first using items that I provide for practice as training wheels. And then I invite people to choose their own items, as one of the people's whose story I just related did, to apply it in their life in practical ways. Some of the expected effects are a kind of serenity or tranquility in the midst of life circumstances, an easier way of dealing with things when they go wrong, generally a greater sense of calm and of leisure. You notice I don't seem to have much concern with silences. I don't go a lot. I don't try to keep things going with nonsense or meaningless syllables. I use silence to allow what I'm about to say to formulate itself in my mind before I say it. So it lends a kind of ease in oneself. Okay. So I'm going to make available more information on the gold key release. In fact, I'm going to make an article available to you, which is called The Likeness of the Gold Key Release and Other More Well-Known Personal Development Procedures. And what I do in that writing is name a bunch of them, state the central features of the teaching, and show how they're using attention, intention, memory, and imagination. And what we're doing is a distilled and focused application of those four faculties. And if you make use of them, if you happen to be involved with any of those other teaching streams, you will find yourself empowered and supported to succeed in those other teachings. So these four faculties, because they are the underpinnings, if you bring them to life in yourself, you'll find that you tend to succeed much more easily with other learning situations and personal development situations. And let's see, we don't have anybody in the on-camera room, so I can't give you the connection there. What I'll be doing is sending out a notification by email of the replay of this presentation, which actually I would prefer be a conversation, but it requires people to be in the on-camera section with me. And although I have provided that a link to get in, clickable link, no one has done that. So no conversation here. So it becomes a presentation. But my point is that I'll be sending out a notification of the replay. And with that, a link to the article on the likenesses of the gold key release and other personal development teachings. I will be offering a course in the gold key release. And for those who take that course, there are advanced courses in much more powerful procedures. And I will say this right now, the gold key release is itself very powerful. There are other procedures such as the trauma dissolution procedure. That's for nasty stuff that's creating unpleasantness in our lives that we would very much like to be through. There's another procedure called the dilemma buster. And this is a procedure for clearing ourselves of internal conflict in certain areas of life. And there's a procedure called the middle way memory matrix ritual, which is a wisdom procedure for getting clear on how we really stand in different areas of our lives. And that often clears up difficulties. So I've given you an overview of the four mental faculties that combine into one to change your life. I've shown how they operate in us by taking you through processes where you get a direct experience of each. I've shown you how they mutually interfit and support each other, and in fact, how they are aspects of each other. And I've taken you through at least the steps of the gold key release so you can see how they can be applied to a procedure that streamlines our life and clears out the counterproductive memories that color and shape our lives. The rest really has to do with practice and application, namely getting it going and using it in yourself so that you can gain the value and see how learning the more advanced procedures would have very far-reaching effects in your own sense of self-empowerment. Okay. Now, that appears to be our show for today. You've got my email address from my email message of announcement, and you will shortly have a link to the article on the likeness of the gold key release in other personal development teachings. And this kind of teaching is really for people who are all for growth and change. I will tell you that you can use it to stabilize your life in various ways so that it's not exclusively dedicated to producing life changing shifts in your own sense of life. It can be used just to make what you've got going work better. But I will tell you that the potential of these procedures is very great, but only to be discovered with practice. So, with that, I bid you goodbye. This is Lawrence Gold signing off. I look forward to further contact with you.